lately, the idea of them wanting to jam their signals coming up here because of cut-ins.
Well, of course, that has nothing to do with broadcasters, basically. That's a cable situation.
Doesn't it affect you in any way?
What, the fact that Buffalo wants to jam their signals?
Right, coming up here. Well, like, will that be a windfall for you, or do you feel? Well, how do you feel about it?
About
Buffalo jamming their signals.
Well, if Buffalo wants to jam their signals, that's their business. So we are offering, when I say we, I guess Canadian broadcasters are offering Canadian viewers most of the American shows that are now available out of Buffalo anyway.
You know, I'm thinking a long-range plan, like more advertising money being spent in Canada. Like, this won't happen overnight, but when American advertisers find out that what they're advertising isn't going to be seen in Canada, their money is going to have to come back up here. Do you think that's going to affect you, or do you not? Are you not counting on it?
Well, I guess from the standpoint of those people who say that if they tax the advertising dollar that goes out of the country, it'll keep the advertising dollar in Canada and thus benefit the Canadian broadcaster, there's no guarantee that will happen, because the advertiser, through their agencies, don't necessarily have to spend those advertising dollars in television. Hopefully they will, and if so, yes, it gives Canadian broadcasters more money to work with to produce more and better Canadian programs.
All right, with cable and repeating stations, your audience is becoming a little bit less defined. Now, what are your specific programming policies according to violence and nudity and sex? What do you follow?
We feel that if a movie title was restricted when it played the movie house, and if it's found that a disclaimer must be aired prior to showing that particular movie, that probably it won't make our primetime schedule. I don't care how hot the title is.
Well, do you think the viewer should be his own censor? Because I think there's more violence in the newspaper.
An 8 or 9 or 10-year-old, I don't think is
Well, you use discretion as to the hour.
That's right.
But apart from that, I feel there's more violence in the newspaper right now. And
most of the mature titles that are available to us are made available to us through a CTV network buy. And if so, most of these are offered to us during prime time. And it is our position to tape delay most of those titles. We don't deprive our audience of any of these titles, but we feel that we have some responsibility to make sure those titles are offered when there is probably a more mature audience available.
Wayne, what criteria does Global use when it comes to programming movies containing sex or violence? Not only movies, but programming in general.
Well, originally, Global was the first, or certainly one of the first broadcasters in Canada to give a rating to all of our movies. We set up a structure from day one, really, to classify the programs as being restricted or adult content or for general viewing. In all of the listings information that we send out weekly to the TV listing supplements and the newspapers, we included the ratings for every movie we ran. And that information was universally ignored by all of the newspapers. And we, quite frankly, dropped the rating process because of really what was universal apathy at that time. There just didn't seem anybody who cared with the ratings we were doing. I think the whole public climate has now changed around where these things are coming to the fore. There's much more front-of-the-mind debate on all of those topics, sex and violence. Essentially, our movies are restricted now to the late evening hours. We do have movies at 7:30, which are of the mystery movie type. But certainly any of the mature titles we're running in late hours, and if it warrants through certain scenes or vocabulary that's used, we put a disclaimer on at the top of the movie saying that it really is not probably going to be acceptable to everybody.
Perhaps the single most important function in a private setup is its news programming. And I was wondering, what's your approach to news with the idea of censoring and lineup?
Well, I don't think censoring is the right word. We do not censor movies. What we set out to do originally, again, with the rating system, was to provide people with a guidance to what the movie content was so that they could make their own censoring judgments. Yes, they would watch it, or no, they wouldn't.
But in reference to news, how do you approach that? Because that involves a bit of discretion too. You're putting it together.
Censoring the news just doesn't happen. I think the global news staff, and I'm sure that's the same in Don's case, and I know it's the case with the other two networks in Canada, that you have mature journalists whose job it is to report to the Canadian people what is happening.
And in that reporting, do you find it important to editorialize?
Yes, I think editorializing is becoming a growing part of broadcasting, not only in television but in radio. Newspapers have been doing it for years. I think you can present a side of the news, and then if it warrants a particular comment from a responsible person, we think that's a good idea.
What is CKCO's policy when it comes to editorializing, Don?
Well, our position has been one in which we realize the importance of editorializing from the standpoint of people who are responsible being in a position to editorialize. However, we have stressed that if the story is presented in such a way that all the facts as they are known are presented, and that both sides of any story, or all sides, or all issues of a story are presented fairly, that the viewer is of sufficient intelligence to determine their own conclusions as to whether there is a right and a wrong within a story. In other words, if the facts are fairly presented, and all facts as they are known are fairly presented, the viewer will probably know whether a local politician has really made a faux pas by taking the position that he or she has taken on a certain municipal issue, et cetera, whatever it may be.
Do you find it valid to point this out to the viewer, or would you just rather present the facts and let them make their own judgment?
Yeah, I think that we have an intelligent audience that can do that.
I think it's important to note here that there really is no such thing as an impartial, unbiased viewing of a news event. As soon as a reporter is there and telling you what he sees, it has an automatic single-person bias brought to it.
Do you see any direction for private broadcasting to take?
Well, I think it should be acknowledged that Canadian broadcasters have served Canadians very well over the years, and I don't think there is any broadcaster interested in only getting by in a kind of operation. I think certainly I believe it's true for Don's operation. I know it is for ours, that everybody wants to do better. I don't think anybody is content with sort of doing a crummy job of whatever they undertake to do. As I mentioned really at the outset, the biggest thing we have to wrestle with and constantly fight is how to deliver a better service, how to serve our viewers better while being able to afford it. We're in a very tough competitive situation. We're matching the resources of a global against CBS, NBC, ABC, that enormous wealth of money that they have in the United States, and yet our pictures are right on the very next channel. Same with Don's. You click over from one to the other, people expect them to be on a par.
Well, I think we're still charged with serving our audience, to inform and entertain that audience. We are also in a position where that service costs money, and as long as we are in a position whereby we have to generate all our income from advertising sales, that there will always be that kind of situation. We have to sell more and bring in more revenue than we spend, or we just can't stay in business.
Well, gentlemen, words well spoken. I'd like to thank Don Willcox of CKCO-TV and Global's Wayne Currie for this insight into private broadcasting in Canada. I'm David Picoski. Good day.
been a production of the 1976 graduating radio and television art students